Dee sat in the silence of the hospital corridor, his body slumped, his eyes staring at the cracks on the floor as if they carried all the answers he had been searching for. The night air was heavy, filled with the hum of machines and the muffled cries of patients behind closed doors. His hands were raw from work, his clothes worn thin, and his heart, though steady, felt carved hollow by sacrifice. For days, he had run through the city like a desperate man, knocking on doors, pleading for help, selling what little he had. Every coin he collected, every piece of himself he gave away, he carried back to Maya's bedside, laying it down as if building a fragile bridge between her fragile life and survival. And yet, as he watched Huyen weep beside her daughter's bed, her hands trembling with fear and exhaustion, a thought returned to him, unshakable and painful. Will all my sacrifices ever be enough? Dee did not want riches. He did not want recognition. All he longed for was a simple word, one syllable heavy with meaning: father. To hear Maya, in her innocent voice, call him that, not out of obligation but out of love. To have Huyen, weary yet strong, finally accept him not just as a companion in hardship, but as the man of their home. He closed his eyes, his heart whispering what his lips could not. I have given everything: my labor, my sleep, my body, my soul. But will there ever come a day when I am not just the man who stood beside them in the storm, but the one they call family? Inside the room, Maya stirred and murmured, "Mama." Her voice was soft, but it pierced him like sunlight through a storm. Huyen leaned close, whispering soothing words, her tears falling like quiet rain. Dee stood at the door, unseen, watching the two beings who had unknowingly become his entire life. A faint smile touched his tired face, though his chest ached with longing. For now, it was enough to love silently, to protect without question. But deep in his soul, a fragile hope burned. Perhaps one day, when the world was gentler and the pain behind them, Maya would run into his arms, calling him father. And perhaps Huyen would look at him not only with gratitude, but with love, and say, "This is our home." Until that day, Dee would go on sacrificing, because love was the only wealth he had left to give. The rain had just stopped, leaving the hospital yard soaked in silver puddles. Dee walked slowly along the dim corridor, his footsteps heavy, his shoulders slouched from exhaustion. His hands, once strong from years of labor, now trembled from endless nights without rest. Every fiber of his being had been poured into saving Maya. He had given his money, his work, his health, everything. Inside the small hospital room, Huyen sat by her daughter's side. Maya's face was pale but calm, her fragile body still fighting against the storm of illness. Huyen wiped her daughter's forehead with trembling fingers, whispering prayers under her breath. Her tears fell silently, like a secret confession to the night. Dee stopped at the doorway, watching them. His heart ached at the sight. The mother and child who had become his entire reason for living. He wanted to step in, to hold them both, to say aloud what his soul had been screaming, "You are my family. You are my home." But instead, he stood in silence, letting the weight of his sacrifices crush him. Every debt he carried, every sleepless night, every bruise on his body, all of it had been for this fragile hope. Not for himself, but for the chance that one day, Maya might look up at him and call him father. Huyen turned, her tired eyes meeting his. In them was gratitude, unspoken yet clear. She knew what he had done, how much he had given, how much of himself he had lost to keep them safe. For a brief moment, their eyes held each other, and Dee felt warmth flicker in his chest. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Will it ever be enough? He wondered. Am I only the man who carried their burdens? Or can I ever truly belong? Dee walked closer, kneeling beside Maya's bed. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his rough fingers trembling with tenderness. She stirred slightly, whispering in her sleep, "Mama." The word pierced him. He longed for another word, the one he had never heard from her lips. "Father." Huyen reached for his hand, her touch light but steady. "Dee," she whispered, her voice breaking, "without you, I don't know how we would have survived." In that fragile moment, hope bloomed in him, fragile but alive. Perhaps the word he longed for had not yet come. Perhaps the home he dreamed of was still far away. But as long as breath remained in him, he would keep sacrificing, keep loving, keep standing beside them, because love, he knew, was not about being called father. It was about being one, even in silence. And someday, maybe, that silence would finally be broken. Dee's life had always been marked by hardship. His hands were rough from years of labor, his back bent from carrying loads heavier than his own body could bear. But none of those burdens compared to the weight he now carried for Huyen and her little daughter, Maya. When Maya fell ill, Dee did not hesitate. He sold his few possessions, begged for loans, and worked until his body trembled with exhaustion. He slept on hospital benches, ate scraps of food, and endured silent hunger so that every coin could be used for Maya's treatment. Each night, he prayed silently, not for himself, but for the fragile child who had unknowingly become the heartbeat of his life. Inside the hospital room, Huyen sat by Maya's bed, her eyes swollen from tears. She whispered lullabies into her daughter's ear, her hands trembling as she stroked Maya's hair. Dee often stood at the doorway, watching the two of them with quiet devotion. They were not his by blood, yet his love for them burned deeper than anything he had ever known. And yet, a question haunted him in the quiet hours of the night. Will I ever truly belong? Dee dreamed of hearing Maya's small voice calling him father. He dreamed of returning to a home where Huyen would no longer see him as just a companion in hardship, but as the man of her heart, the protector of their family. But dreams were fragile things, and reality was often colder. One evening, after a long day of work to pay the hospital fees, Dee returned with tired steps. He entered the room to find Huyen dozing lightly beside Maya, her head resting on the bed. Her face, though marked with fatigue, still carried a softness that pierced his heart. Maya stirred in her sleep, and in a whisper barely audible, she murmured, "Mama, Papa." Dee froze. His breath caught in his chest. He leaned closer, unsure if he had imagined it. The child was still asleep, her lips barely moving, but the word had been real, soft, innocent, and filled with the purity of a child's heart. Tears welled in his eyes. It was just a dreamlike murmur, perhaps without meaning, but to Dee, it was everything. In that single word, he felt his sacrifices had not been in vain. For the first time, he believed that maybe, one day, his dream of being a father and having a true home with Huyen would no longer be just a silent hope. He sat down quietly, holding Maya's tiny hand in his rough palm. Huyen stirred awake, noticing his tears, and whispered softly, "Dee, what's wrong?" He shook his head, smiling through the tears. "Nothing, Huyen, nothing at all. I just realized how much this little girl means to me, and how much you do too." Huyen's eyes softened, and for a moment, she reached out and placed her hand over his. No words were spoken, but in that fragile touch, Dee felt a promise unspoken, but real. And in the silence of that hospital night, Dee's heart whispered with hope. Perhaps love, given selflessly, will one day return as family. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the pale glow of a bedside lamp. Maya lay on the bed, her small body weakened by fever, her breath shallow but steady. Beside her, Huyen held her hand tightly, whispering quiet words of comfort, though her own tears betrayed the fear in her heart. At the doorway stood Dee. His clothes were damp from the evening rain, his shoes muddy, and his hands trembling from exhaustion. He had just returned from another long day of work, carrying a plastic bag with porridge and medicine. For days he had not eaten properly, giving every bit of his strength and money to Maya's treatment. No one had asked him to do it. No one had promised him anything in return. And yet, he did it because his heart would not let him walk away. As he stepped closer, he saw the worry carved into Huyen's face. She was exhausted, her eyes red from sleepless nights, her body weakened from taking care of her daughter. Huyen, Dee said softly, placing the bag on the table. Eat a little. You need strength too. Huyen looked up at him, her lips trembling. Dee, I don't know how to thank you. If it weren't for you, I don't know how Maya and I would survive. Dee forced a smile, though his chest ached. Don't thank me. Just let me stay by your side. That's enough. But when he turned away, his thoughts were heavy. In the silence of his heart, he asked himself the question that never left him. Will my sacrifices ever be enough? Will I ever truly be part of their family? He dreamed of hearing Maya call him father, even just once. He dreamed of returning home from work to see Huyen waiting for him, not just out of gratitude, but out of love. Yet he feared that his place in their lives would always be temporary, a man who helped in hard times, but never truly belonged. Later that night, as Maya stirred in her sleep, she murmured softly, Papa. The word was faint, almost lost in the hum of hospital machines, but it struck Dee's heart like lightning. His breath caught, his hands trembled. Did she really say it? Or was it only a dream? Tears filled his eyes. For the first time, he allowed himself to hope that one day, his sacrifices might blossom into something greater than gratitude. That one day, he might not just be Uncle Dee, but truly father. He sat by Maya's bed, holding her tiny hand in his rough palms. Huyen, noticing his quiet tears, reached out and touched his arm gently. Dee, whatever happens, you're already family to us. At that moment, in the quiet hospital room filled with pain, hope, and love, Dee felt the faint warmth of a dream beginning to take shape, a dream of a home. Not just for Huyen and Maya, but for himself too. This story teaches us that true love is measured not by words, but by sacrifices made in silence. Dee gave everything he had, his time, his strength, his health, without expecting anything in return. His only hope was to see Maya recover and to ease the burden on Huyen's shoulders. It reminds us that family is not only built by blood, but also by compassion, devotion, and selflessness. Sometimes, the greatest bond grows from the quiet acts of someone who chooses to stay when life becomes the hardest. Huyen's tears, Maya's fragile smile, and Dee's unwavering presence show us that love is not about grand promises, but about standing by one another in moments of despair. The lesson is clear. Even if the world does not always recognize our sacrifices, love given with a pure heart is never wasted. Sooner or later, it blooms into trust, belonging, and the kind of family we all long for.